You're now in the middle of your worldwide tour, and we've just been told that it's going to take you all the way to Spain next year.
Yes.
Been told it's the 14th of July in Barcelona and 15th of July in Madrid.
That's right.
That's right. What would the audience can expect of this tour?
Well, that one, because there are a variety of different formats that I'm touring in right now. I've just come from America, where I've been touring with a couple of American musicians, doing a kind of three-piece power thing, electronics and guitar. And this tour that we're doing right now is very acoustic, as you'll see tonight if you're staying for the show. It's these two guys I'm working with are multi-instrumentalists, so we've reworked all the old songs as well as some of the new stuff in that format. But when I come over to Spain and do those two shows, that's going to be a full band. That's my kind of rock band, as it were. So what people will hear is a little bit of Visage, a little bit of Ultravox in there, quite a bit of Ultravox in there, and some solo stuff. So it's a good cross section of music that I've made over the last 35 years. So it's a good representation of what it is I do.
Your last work, Fragile, was published in 2014. How do you think your music have developed from The Gift all the way down to your last work?
I think, without even realising it, I mean, just like growing up, just as you get older, you become hopefully more wise, you experience more things. You don't have to think about how you act. You think, well, now I'm 40, I've got to act a certain way, or now I'm 50, I've got to act a certain way. It just changes naturally. And that's kind of what happens with music. When you start, especially songwriting, when you start writing songs, they're very naive, very simplistic. You've never done it before. So it's very tentative, you're not sure of what you're doing. And sometimes that naivety can lead to some amazing things, because you have no expectations of yourself, you just do it, and all of a sudden become successful, and all of a sudden you've got parameters that you have to work within. So without realising it, you think, well, I've been successful with that, but I want to try something different. But that success is always there, kind of bordering what you're going to do next. So it's kind of infringing your creativity. So with songwriting, you start with this very naive, simplistic thing, and as you experience life, it morphs, it changes, it gets more grown up, more adult. The themes are different, the subject matter is different. And when it came to writing Fragile, I wrote about what was important to me, and that was my life and everything going on in my life. So it's a very honest, real, heartfelt piece of music. That's probably why it took 10 years to make it.
You were, in a way, part of the Blitz and the New Romantics movement back in the 80s. Do you think that what happened then, the Brits and all the New Romantics, could happen nowadays in these digital times, now that people talk to each other over the internet?
Yeah, it's a very different world, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the interaction these days, certainly in the last 10 years, has changed dramatically. Young people do. They spend their lives looking at screens. They're on their phones, they're on the Snapchats and the Facebooks, and they're messaging and doing all of that stuff, rather than being together. In the Blitz days, you had none of that. You had nothing. The Blitz grew out of punk, which came about because people had nothing. Young people had nothing to do. They had nothing to look forward to. The job opportunities were bad. The UK was in a bad situation politically, and it grew out of frustration. Well, the whole Blitz thing grew out of the punk thing. So the frustration and the political situation was exactly the same, but the attitude of the kids was different. So what the kids in Blitz used to do, they used to go into their grandmother's wardrobes and find a dress and then find a pair of shoes and put these things together with this wild makeup. So they made something from absolutely nothing because they didn't have the distractions of iPhones and pads and computers and 24-hour music television and things. You created something. That's how interesting things happen. These days, I'm not sure. I mean, people keep asking, you did Band Aid, you did Live Aid. Would you think of doing another concert or another record? And I'm thinking, I'm not sure a record or a concert is the way to go. It's not the medium that people would use to get young people connected. Maybe you have to think, well, they're not a group of people, they are individuals, all talking as individuals, interacting with their technology. So I'm not sure. I think every generation has a revolution. Every generation wants to fight against the generation before. If they were into long-haired rock, the next generation want to be into clean-cut folk or whatever, traditional music. Maybe there'll be a backlash against technology, and people will start, thinking when you go to dinner with your family, you talk to your family rather than pressing buttons and doing all of that. So maybe until that happens, there won't be a need for a little individual group like the Blitz kids,
Obviously, yes, we're going to have to talk about Band Aid and Live Tales as well. When you started putting Band Aid and Live Aid together, did you ever think that it would become something as big as it did and something like would change the story of pop music?
No, not at all. I suspect that had we known it was going to be become as globally big as it did, we may have done it differently. Maybe not for the better, maybe for the worse, because you would start analysing everything you did. That's what I was saying about songwriting and naivety. We were incredibly naive. We didn't know what we were doing. We were using whatever tools we had to try and make a difference. The tools we had was songwriting, music, and our friends, who happened to be in some of the most popular bands of the day. So I think once we realised that, because the song wasn't very good, the song was okay, it was okay, but once all those people turned up to add their strength to the song, then I think we realised that just by the nature of what we were actually doing and trying to achieve, it became newsworthy. And once it was newsworthy, that's when it grew into this monster, this huge thing. So if the media hadn't been interested in it, it would never have made any difference. But because this was unique to get this bunch of artists together to make this record where they were going to give away all the money, was a novelty to the media. So once we knew that the media, the artists, all of that was going to collide and collaborate, we knew it was going to be something big, but nobody saw it growing into Live Aid and Live 8 and all of that. We never saw it as a 30-year project. We saw it as a 6-month project.
Yeah, probably. Do you think it really makes a difference in the way people feel about charity and helping others?
I think it changed young people's attitudes towards charity. Up until, I suppose, maybe prior to us doing it, George Harrison had done a concert for Bangladesh a few years prior. And it was George Harrison who advised us to get good accountants and make sure the money was safe. And he kind of tried to do it, but when we did it, it was on a much bigger level. And one of the legacies I think it's come from doing it is that it changed young people's attitudes towards charity. It was okay to care. All of a sudden, because we were using artists they liked and respected and admired and followed, artists who maybe up until that point they always had thought that were lining their own pockets, were living their life of luxury and didn't give a shit about anybody else. All of a sudden they saw these artists doing something for someone else. And it kind of made it okay, you know. Up until that point, I suspect, like maybe I did when I was younger, that charity work was something you did when you were really old. You know, the Women's Institute or whatever, you did something, you know, when you were retiring, you know, rather than sitting doing nothing, you worked for a charity. And that was maybe a young person's attitude towards what it was. And then we made it cool, and it was okay. And so kids got involved. And now, 30 years down the line, at Christmas, when the school children are doing their Christmas nativities, their plays and stuff, they'll sing White Christmas, and then they'll sing Jingle Bells, and then they'll sing Do They Know It's Christmas? And it's now part of their Christmas. But their teachers and their parents and whatever tell them what that song's about, so they all know.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Will it be a new Midge Ure album anytime soon?
Yes, there will be. I've been working on a couple of things recently. I mean, I've been doing a lot of live work, but when I'm not touring live, I'm in the studio. I've always had my own facilities. So I've been in the studio working on some new stuff, but I've also been working on hopefully something that will come out next year, which is an orchestral album of kind of reimagining and reconstructing some of the old songs. Right up until Fragile, I've cherry-picked songs that would really suit that cinematic orchestral sound. And I've spent a long time finding someone to do it with me, an arranger. And I've done that, so I've got kind of half the album is done already, so that will probably come out before an album of new material. But I'm working on both right now.
Yes, brilliant. Rich Kids were back on stage together in 2010 for a very special reason as well. How do you feel to go back together after over 30 years?
Well, it was funny. I was at the Q Magazine Awards last night, and sitting with Glenn Matlock. And a year before that, Glenn and I were at the Q Magazine Awards, sitting at the table together, and we hadn't seen each other for quite a while. And, you know, talking, and then you kind of run out of things to say. So it went kind of quiet, and I said, if we ever did any shows again, who would we get to replace Steve, who's no longer with us? I said, you know, if we ever did anything, just as a thing to say. And then he started to say, well, okay, let me think about that. And we started talking, and once we started talking about it, it kind of became, you know, more possible to do it, especially with this 40th anniversary of punk coming up. And I have to say, it was great fun. It was really good. I didn't know how it would work. We had Gary Kent from Spandau Ballet come in and play guitar with us. But like all of these things, you rehearse for 3 or 4 days to do one show. And it felt frustrating, I think, at the end. It would have been great to go out and do, you know, 10 shows. But it didn't happen. But it may happen in the future. It was great. It was good to hear Rusty back on the drums. And Glenn obviously enjoyed it. And I had a ball. Just had to remember all the lyrics, remember all the words.
So we may be able to see you again.
Well, if people want to see it, if there's a demand for it, it's interesting enough. There's people in America have asked the same thing. As I said, I've just come back from America, and they see little bits of the show on YouTube. People record it on their cameras and it, and there seems to be a bit of interest in it. So we'll have to wait and see.
Oh.
No plans.
Well, hopefully. What do you think about Bob Dylan? Bob Dylan be given the Nobel Prize as a songwriter.
Well, it's a weird one. My brother-in-law is a very well respected music journalist, Barney Hoskins, and I think he's a bit annoyed about it, which I'm quite surprised about. And I think it's because he doesn't see songwriting as literature, and I'm not sure I do either. Literature should be, proper writing. Songwriting is great, and Dylan's songwriting is wonderful. We've all lived our lives to the songs that he wrote. But maybe it's just it's just like a category, I suppose. Maybe they wanted to give something to Dylan, but they don't actually have, you know, a Nobel category for songwriting. So they just thought, well, it's writing of some sort, so let's put them in that thing. It's like, you know, I've got many doctorates, honorary degrees. You know, I've got a doctor of music and a doctor of laws and all of that. I know nothing about laws. I know a little bit about music, but they kind of just the umbrella. It's the kind of thing. Okay, well that will cover what you do in there somewhere, and I think maybe that's what it was. But what an amazing thing for music, though. You know, that is deemed important enough to bestow something like that on a songwriter, which normally you wouldn't think would happen for, you know, maybe a couple of centuries, that people would realise that what we're living through, although it's popular music to us, in a couple of hundred years, people will see that the same way they see, you know, Beethoven or Mozart or whatever. They'll see it in a totally different light. And we're living it because it's there around us all the time. We don't give it the acclaim that maybe it should have. So I think it's quite amazing that that's happened.